What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me, as always, AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. We are now 3 weeks into the MAC schedule, and the road to Detroit is anything but clear.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the 6 games here this past weekend. 5 of them were 1-point games or 1-score games. 4 of them were, excuse me. And then we had 1 blowout. But yeah, I mean, there was no short of excitement here this past week on the 16th. As we're starting into the thick of MAC football season, conference play, that is. MACtion starts here in 2-3 weeks now?
Yeah, we get midweek MACtion the first week of November. I believe it's like November 2nd is the first weekend or first week that we do midweek MACtion.
First week, yeah. So that's going to sneak up on here really close. But let's get right into the highlights here from this past week. We'll start with Ohio. They traveled to Buffalo and nearly pulled out one against the Bulls, dropping that one 26-27. Talk about a thriller of a game, but also a record-setting game as well.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting game with how it came down. Obviously, everybody knows the struggles that OU has had all year. 1-6 on the season, 1-2 in conference play. And Buffalo hits the chip shot at the end of the game to take this one and to notch their first conference victory, which is a little bit unprecedented, knowing the history of Buffalo in recent years, for them to come out and really not do much all game. OU went up on Buffalo 21-0 in the first quarter. Buffalo charged back, scored 10 in the second. Ohio added another 5 with a safety. And a field goal. Buffalo storms back, takes 17 points with the last second field goal to cap this one 27-26. You want to talk about that history a little bit?
Yeah, they definitely scored. 17 unanswered points in the fourth. That's absolutely brutal for OU. Going into the fourth quarter at 26-17, 26-10 was the score going into the fourth quarter. But I mean, it's a shame OU dropped this because they definitely had the highlight of the game. Maybe the entire MAC season. Amari Rogers set a record, the longest rush by a quarterback, 99 yards. He also led the team in rushing, 22 carries for 183 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was 6 of 10 throwing in the air. As Van Treese on the other side of the ball was 22 of 30 for 251, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. And as for rushing for the Buffalo, Dylan McDuffie, 23 carries, 143 yards, 1 touchdown on the day.
Well, and I'll tell you this. Well, I was going to say Armani Rogers. This is a kid who is going to – Ohio is going to live or die by this kid the rest of the season, I think. You talk about that 99-yard touchdown. Not only is that the longest of the season, that is the longest in NCAA history by a quarterback. So pretty special moment for him to get that against a solid Buffalo team, a team who is doing, I think, a little bit better than most expected, but not as well, I think, as some may have hoped. For him to rip off that run, and it was right down the left sideline there as he's running, and he just looked fast, and I'm talking faster than anybody on the field. Nobody was touching him once he broke through.
Yeah, once he got to that second and third level, he turned on the afterburners, was gone down that far sideline. But a great play for OU. It's one of those things that you hate it for them because obviously we're up 17 going into the fourth, and they couldn't quite hang on. I think we had a little high. We had some expectations for OU this year. Obviously, losing Frank Solich was going to be huge, but promoting rather a coach from who was already in the program on the staff we thought they'd pick up where they left off, and that just hasn't been the case.
No, it
You look
really
at,
hasn't.
they lost by 20 to Syracuse. They lost by 2 to Duquesne. They lost by double digits to Louisiana, lost by 29 to Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Akron, lost by 3 to Central. So they're in a lot. They are in some of these games. They really are. They just need to learn how to finish. And I think that just comes with time. Newish staff.
Sure.
But I think that's one thing that they'll just kind of, as they play more, they'll get that figured out.
Absolutely. And I think, this was a big win for Buffalo, who are now sitting at 3-4 on the season. For Ohio, this was an opportunity, one of those missed opportunities. Ohio very easily could be 3-0 in conference play. You mentioned dropping a close one to Central and then dropping a heartbreaker here to Buffalo. There's a world in which OU is 3-0 in conference play and everything is okay. Right now, they're sitting at 1-6 on the season. One more loss and they are out of bowl contention. And I'll be honest with you, they'd have to rip off 5 straight for me as a bowl runner to consider them for the postseason. And I just don't see that happening for the Bobcats.
No, neither do I. They're in a tough spot right now. And hopefully they can get a couple wins here, maybe finish at least above at 500 or not, if not a game above at the end of the year when it comes into conference play.
Mm-hmm.
Another game, another team you and I are really kind of pulling for this year, Akron.
Yeah.
They dropped one to Miami of Ohio, 34-21. That game was down in Oxford. Miami of Ohio sitting at 3-4 at the end of that one. Akron just sitting there at 2-5.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a game that Akron really had an opportunity to win. They really, really did.
Yeah, they did. They had plenty of opportunities in this one all throughout. And the box score does not really indicate just how much Akron really was in this game. There were a lot of issues in terms of just containing Miami, but Akron was holding their own. Zach Gibson goes up 25 of 39 for 291 yards, throws for 3 touchdowns. So you can't really blame the offense on this one. I think it was just the defense could not slow down Jack Sorensen, Mosey. They just couldn't stop them. And at the end of the day, obviously AJ Mayer, 19 of 27, 229, 3 scores. You just couldn't slow that offense down. And the Miami defense showed up in a big way, forcing Akron into some really, really tough spots.
Yeah, they really did. We talked about Jack Sorensen early on in the year, him being a contender for one of the MAC Offensive Player of the Year because of his talent. He only had 5 receptions, about 113 yards with 1 touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
He put out a day for the Red Hawks offense. And this is a game that he needed. And this is a game that the program needed from him because it's been kind of slow here the past couple of weeks, I'd say. He only has 565 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's averaging 16.6 yards per reception with only 34 receptions. So he's had kind of a slow start to the year, but I think as we get into MAC play, I think the Red Hawk offense will they'll strongly rely on him getting him the ball.
Sure. And I want to look at this too. You look at the time of possession, and this is what I think is really interesting about this game, right? Time of possession favored Miami by less than a minute. Mm-hmm. First downs, Miami 22, Akron 21. Turnovers, they were even at 1 apiece. Total yards is the big difference here. Miami was just hitting home run plays all game, 474 yards to 356. So when you say Akron had an opportunity to win this game, just looking at the stats a little bit closer, they 100% had every chance to win this game. They just couldn't get it done. Tom Arth, the coach down there, doing everything he can to get Akron some wins, understanding the struggles of getting wins for a program like Akron. I think they're going to be just fine. They are 2-5 on the season, 1-2 in conference play. They've got nowhere to go but up. I think they've already exceeded some season expectations by some people by picking up 2 wins. So as long as they keep moving forward and keep moving up, I think Tom Arth's going to do some great things for them down there.
Absolutely. Like we talked about, they threw for 291 yards, but they only rushed for 65.
Yeah.
On top of Miami running for 245. That's just not going to get it done. Akron averaging 2.7 yards a carry, and Miami averaging 6.3 yards toting the rock. Even penalties, they were matched up at 9 apiece, 75 yards for Akron, 80 for Miami, Ohio. Across the board, they were fairly even, but that rushing, 120 yards more Miami of Ohio had. So that's one of those things that the coach Arth and the offensive coordinator are really going to have to get a ground game established, but also on the defensive side of the ball, they're really going to have to toughen up with that front seven and stop the rush. Because the MAC teams love to run the ball. It's no secret to that. And as we get a conference play, it's only going to get tougher.
Sure. Moving on to Ball State. Yeah, I was going to say, moving on to Ball State, Eastern Michigan. This was a thriller. This one came down to a fourth quarter stop for Ball State. The Cardinals taking this one 38-31. They are now on a 3-game winning streak after a rough non-conference schedule that saw them knock off Army just a couple weeks ago. They've now moved to 2-1 in conference play, and they are in the driver's seat. In the front passenger seat of the MAC West, trailing only Northern Illinois. Ball State looked like they're returning to form. They're starting to figure it out. I think having a few of those rough games early on really is helping them figure out what they need to do. Drew Plitt looked good as always, 27 of 35, 207 yards, 1 touchdown. His counterpart for Eastern Michigan, however, Ben Bryant, 35 of 48, 331 yards, 1 touchdown. The nail in the coffin for them, the 2 interceptions.
Yeah, it really was. Bryant tried to force the ball there towards the end. I believe it was like the second play of their final drive. He threw one over the middle and it was picked off by Cosby, I believe.
Yep.
And the big game changer, I think, for Ball State was the freshman Carson Steele, 18 carries, 138 yards, 1 touchdoon. Yeah. I don't know if you got to watch any of this game, but he was on a man on a mission. He was
hunting for that end zone.
He was, and he's a running back who's not afraid to put his head down and put a hat on a hat. And he did that very well at Eastern here this past weekend. Jordan Hall, 10 receptions, 58 yards on the day. But one thing Ball State did a really good job of is just protecting the football. They had the ball for 32 minutes, just about 5 minutes more than Eastern did. 233 yards total passing, 200 rushing, keeping things pretty even there. 6 penalties for 50 yards compared to Eastern's 4 for 40. But the Ball State did not turn the ball over, and as Eastern threw 2 picks, which I think you can look back at it and say, hey, that was a huge difference in the ball game. On third down, the Cardinals were 9 of 13, as Eastern was 7 of 13. But Eastern did convert, though, 2 4th downs, which is huge. 2 of 3 on 4th down. The Ball States were 0 for 0 there.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the offense was efficient. Defense stood up when they needed to. They got the ball over when they needed to. And we talked about the Akron game and the lack of the rushing attack. Eastern only had 46 yards on the ground, and they ran it 26 times, and averaged only 1.8 yards per carry, as Ball State averaged 5. One thing that the Ball State offense did a great job of, especially Carson Steele, is he never went backwards. His momentum all game long took him forward, whether it's 2 yards, 3 yards, over the goal line, over the first down marker, whatever it was, he was moving forward, and that was a great job for great game for Coach New. The offensive Kevin Lynch, the offensive coordinator, did a fantastic job of calling a great game. Mm-hmm. But the Ball States, we talked about it last week, they're starting to find their stride. Drew Plitt, he protected the ball. He didn't have crazy numbers, but he had the numbers. He had enough numbers that the Cardinals were able to pull out the win.
Yeah, but when you got 200 rushing yards with the team that equal 4 scores, you don't need to put up crazy numbers as the starting quarterback. You can just kind of coast and get into your mechanics, get into your rhythm, figure out what you need to do. Ball State looked really good in this one. Defense, still a little suspect. However, they did knock off Eastern Michigan at the factory, 38-31, to move to 2-1 in conference play, and they are now in second place in the MAC West. Moving on to the first place team. This one was an exciting game. We have Northern Illinois taking on Bowling Green State at Northern Illinois, and it was homecoming.
Yeah, it was. Northern Illinois, we've talked about it here previously. I've been to a game there. It's a tough place to play, no matter who you are. And BG, having a down year, going into that game at 2-4, coming out 2-5, that's tough. you look at Rocky Lombardi was only 4 of 8 for 38 yards passing, 1 touchdown for Northern Illinois, along with Jay Ducker, 33 carries, 210 yards.
Mm-hmm.
But you go to the other side of the ball here for the Falcons. Matt McDonald, 16 of 41, 235 yards, 1 touchdown. He also led their team in rushing, 6 carries, 75 yards for the Falcons. This is another game too we've talked about, a little lopsided on in the stat book.
Yeah, a little bit lopsided on the stat book. A little bit. This one was interesting because there's a lot of yards that were gained through big plays for Northern Illinois. You talk about Rocky Lombardi only throwing 50% for 38 yards. But when you can rely on Jay Ducker to carry the rock 210 yards over 33 attempts, that's a big one. When you can get, Trevon Rudolph to return a kickoff 100 yards for a touchdown, you don't really have to do much. Momentum is on your side. And for a Bowling Green team who is 2-5 now, 0-3 in conference play, their opportunity to go to Detroit is all but done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Northern Illinois, they're going to be a fun team to watch as we go here forward. Coach Hammock, who we spoke to at media day, was obviously an NIU guy, NIU running back in the day. They've come off a huge win early on this year at Georgia Tech. Following, they were very close to beating Wyoming too, only losing that by 7. But going to Ann Arbor, losing the way they did. But they've rebounded since then. They're playing good ball. They keep the games close, but they're doing just enough to come out on top when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's good for them, good for that program. They have responded well after starting the season 2-2, now moving to 5-2, moving to a perfect 3-0 in conference play, sitting at first in the MAC West division, looking like a team that nobody was picking to win the MAC West, especially after going 0-6 last year, looking like the team who is going to dominate and might be heading back to Detroit after a 1-year hiatus.
Yeah, absolutely. Ball State, they play at Northern Illinois here in 2 weeks now, 3 weeks. And so that's going to be a Wednesday night. That might be the first action game for the Cards. I know, it's the second week of action on a Wednesday night. That's going to be a fun primetime game up there in DeKalb. And I'm sure the crowd's going to be loud. It's going to be, because I did a primetime game there on Tuesday, Wednesday. It was just so fun.
Sure.
And so that's going to be a massive game for the Cardinals, but it's going to be that one's going to be highest scoring in the sense that both teams are finally starting to hit their stride about the same time. Northern hit their stride maybe a week or so before Ball State, but now the Cardinals have finally hit theirs. And that, I think that game is going to determine who goes to Detroit.
Yeah, I think so. With Ball State finding their stride, Northern Illinois obviously returning to their 2010s decade glory, I think this will be a great primetime game for both programs, just to see who does get the opportunity to go to Detroit. So that'll be a fun one. Looking forward to that one. As we continue down the list, this was an overtime game, the first overtime game for MACtion. Toledo at Central Michigan. It was Central Michigan's homecoming. Central Michigan downs the Rockets 26-23 in overtime. And this was a game that had me on pins and needles for the entire fourth quarter. You and I were texting back and forth briefly through this game, talking about what's going on with Toledo. Why, where's this offense? This offense that put up 29 on Notre Dame. This offense who put up almost 50 on UMass. This offense just was not finding their rhythm. I think, however, looking at it, Coach Candle is finally settling in on using DeQuan Finn as his primary starter, which will only benefit Toledo going forward, sticking with one quarterback. He went 15 of 32, 208 yards. Bryant Koback, 15 carries, 87 yards. Isaiah Winstead, 4 catches for 108 yards. This game was wild from start to finish. Toledo down 14 at one point, down 10 later, goes back down 14, down 10. And fourth quarter, just Toledo came alive, scored 3 different times to tie it, to send it into overtime. DeQuan Finn with a couple touchdown runs. Looks like he had 3 touchdown runs. Toledo's field goal kickers. Thomas Cluckley out there banging in 3 different field goals. Obviously, Toledo couldn't get it done in overtime. Marshall Meter for Central Michigan pounding in the 38-yard field goal to give Central the win, to move them to 4-3, 2-1 in conference play. Toledo drops to 3-4, 1-2 in conference play.
I think one thing that was huge for Toledo, one thing that they haven't been able to do in a while, and that's to keep the penalty yards under 100 yards. They only had 7 penalties for 50 yards, as Central had 9 for 79.
Mm-hmm.
That's an area where Toledo had really struggled over the last 3 or 4 games when it came to penalty yards. I mean, they were over 100 yards in a few of those games.
Yeah.
But passing wise, Toledo had 208 yards compared to Central's 204. So this is a game that was, I would say, only a minute and a half or so in difference between possessions. But I think this is a game when you look across the board was the most equally matched. Both teams, and when it comes statistically, they're both evenly matched across the board, and it shows here on the post-game stats.
Yeah, and I think that was a big thing for both teams, and this was something that has kind of plagued Toledo a little bit. The lack of turnovers as well. That was very critical. No fumbles, no interceptions, anything like that. But I think it also hurt the Toledo defense for not having any interceptions, not having any fumbles. A defense that really forced opponents into bad spots all season long. Couldn't get it done here. Toledo, again, now sitting at last, which is really odd to see. Sitting at last in the MAC West. Obviously, we've got 5 more MACtion games for these teams to go through. Only one perfect team remains in conference play. I'm confident that Toledo will bounce back to some degree, but who knows if this offense can figure out their woes, they can respond. If their defense can figure out their woes, they can respond. But not looking good overall for Toledo as they wrap up the second half of their football schedule.
No, it's one thing too. You texted me the other day is how did Toledo beat Ball State? It's like they've kind of reversed roles since that game. Ball State's won out, and Toledo's been struggling, even though Toledo looked really good that game in Muncie.
Yeah, well, and exactly. I mean, Toledo held a very explosive Ball State offense to 4 field goals. It was
4 field goals, yeah.
And then they go and put up 45 on Western Michigan just 2 weeks later, which is just absolutely mind-blowing to see that that's what happened. But I think that's the beautiful thing that we love about the MAC and MACtion. You can never tell what's going to happen on any given Saturday or weekday.
Yeah, without a doubt. Next game here, get our final game, one I'm most proud of because I picked it right. I won this weekend, I think.
Yeah, you went 5-1 this week. Oh no, you went 4-2 because we both picked Toledo. You went 4-2, okay. And then I went 3-3.
3-3. Yeah, Western Michigan hosted Kent State, the Golden Flashes, and pretty much trounced them 64. Not pretty much. They trounced them 64-31. This was a game I think a lot of people did not expect that final score. Dustin Crum was 15 of 26 for 210, 2 tutties. Caleb Elby, he was 15 of 22 for 307, 3 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. This is a game where offensively, Western Michigan was efficient in the run game and the pass game as well. Western's leading receiver, Jalen Hall, 5 receptions, 144 yards, 1 touchdown. This is one of those games where you kind of, if you would have saw that score, you go, "There's no way that has to go." But when you look at the stats, it really does show because Kent was 4 carries, 39 yards. That kind of seems to be a theme here this past week. Is teams either ran the ball very well or ran the ball very poorly. Mm-hmm. And in this case, Western ran it extremely well. State did not.
Sure. And time of possession, very much in favor of Western. First downs, very much in favor of Western. Yards, very much in favor of Western. 648 total yards for Western compared to Kent's 362. Big opportunity for Western to continue playing, getting some big, important wins as they continue to move forward. And now sitting at 2-1 after getting embarrassed at home by Ball State, they're charging back in a big way.
Yeah, most definitely. I think they're going to be able to make a run here as the season progresses. You kind of look at the standings here. It's Northern Illinois 3-0, Ball State, Western, and Central all tied there at 2-1 in the conference, with Eastern and Toledo at 1-2 in the West. And we talked about it earlier too. You know, the East is up for grabs still. Miami, Ohio sitting at 2-1, Kent sitting there at 2-1, Buffalo and OU and Akron are still sitting there at 1-2 as BG 0-3. But I think the West is going to come down to those top three teams are really going to fight till the last game of the year, because they all have it. I think essentially the top four teams in the West have an opportunity to go to Detroit at this. And
Sure.
I think it's going to be really interesting as they go forward here. But I think Caleb Elby has been kind of a surprise player in the conference this year. We didn't know a whole lot about him. We expected the Dustin Crumbs and the Drew Plitz of the world to light the MAC on fire this year, so to say. And Elby's kind of put his name in there as one of those dominant quarterbacks in the conference.
Yeah, Elby's looked really good this year. Been very impressed with him, especially in that win over Pittsburgh. Just absolutely coming out, playing some good football, playing some smart football. And there's a reason that they're contending for not only the MAC West crown, but potentially the MAC championship as a whole.
That's going to be really – they're going to push, I think, towards the end of this year here. I want to look at Western's schedule here, see what they've got coming up. They've got Toledo this week at Toledo. Then they host Central. They go host Akron. They go to Eastern. And they go to Northern Illinois. Final game of the year. That could end up being a major game.
Potentially the de facto MAC West championship game.
Absolutely. I mean, that game could decide, that game will decide probably actually who goes to Detroit when it comes down to Western, Ball State, and Northern Illinois. That game could have the final say.
Sure. Well, that wraps it up for last week. Moving into this week, let's go ahead and lead off with our pick'ems. First game of the week, noon kickoff at Bowling Green, Eastern Michigan, makes the hour drive down from Ypsilanti, taking on the Falcons at Deutsch Perry Stadium. I think I like Eastern in this one. Sorry, Bowling Green, nothing personal. I just think Eastern has a better team, better offense, better defense. And this is an Eastern team who is trying to stay in the thick of the MAC West and the MAC race. So I think Eastern takes this one.
Yeah, I think Eastern does too. It's kind of interesting too. They're only favored by 3 points at BG. I can imagine that line will probably move a little bit as Saturday gets a little closer. But Eastern, they're good. They're a good team. Their offense is nice. They're obviously going to be way too much for BG as BG is struggling here down the stretch, sitting there at 2-5. The next game, though, Northern Illinois at Central. This will be an interesting one.
This is going to be a fun one. I think Northern Illinois is coming off a close win over the previously mentioned Bowling Green Falcons, making the road trip up to Central Michigan. Central always plays well at Kelly Shorts. This one's a coin toss for me. I think I got to go Northern Illinois, but anything can happen. But I think I'm going to trust my guns on this one and go with Northern Illinois.
Yeah. CMU, they're 5-point favorites at home. I'm going to go CMU. And
Okay.
I think the only difference is because it's a home game. I think playing at home, if this was at Northern, I'd be on the Huskies bandwagon. But I think, I don't know, there's something about playing, like you said, playing up a short stadium. That's a tough place to play. Central, they're right on the cusp of being in that conversation. And I think this is a game that can put them over.
Moving on to Kent State at Ohio. Kent State's coming off of an embarrassing loss. They've got to refocus and Sean Lewis has got to get these guys ready to play the Bobcats, who frankly need a big win. This one is at Peden Stadium down in Athens. My money's on Kent State on this one. I think it's the smart play. Ohio just doesn't have an answer. They gave Buffalo all they could handle, but Kent State dropped 50 on Buffalo just 2 weeks ago. I think Kent State overwhelms the Bobcats, and OU drops to 1-7 on the season.
Yeah, I'm taking Kent also, even though they're favored by only 5.5 points. I really like Kent State. It just, like you mentioned, OU has a lot of stuff to figure out.
Mhm.
And now isn't the time to figure it out as we get into the thick of conference play. It's kind of what those non-conference games are for. OU's just been struggling to find their groove, to find their identity. Kent State, we know Dustin Crum, we know what he's all about. Even in a losing effort like last week, he stood up, put up nice numbers. I like Kent on the road as well. Next game is homecoming. The Red Hawks traveling to Muncie. Ball State's homecoming. Ball State's favored by 5 points. I like Ball State in this one, not being a homer, not because it's homecoming, but like we've talked about, they are finally hitting their stride offensively. They found their running back in Carson Steele, the freshman. He's coming off a huge game against Eastern last week. Drew Plitz not turning the ball over. He's putting up 200, 250 yards through the air. I think this is a great opportunity. This is going to be a good test for the Ball State Cardinals. And coming in, winning, 4 in a row now, 3 in a row?
3 in a row for Ball State, yeah.
3 in a row for the Cardinals. I like Drew Plitt. I like Ball State. I think Mike New has these guys in a good position to make a run here towards the end of the season. So I'm taking the Cards.
I like Ball State at home. This is obviously a big rivalry game between Miami and Ball State. I think I'm also leaning Ball State just because they just look so good right now. That peculiar loss to Toledo to start conference play, and they have just been rolling, not really doing much to surrender a bunch of points that they don't need to. And the offense, when they do, picking up the slack and carrying them to victory. I really like Ball State at home. Schumann Stadium is going to be rocking. There's going to be a lot of people there for homecoming. And Ball State wants to avenge their one loss of the season last year. Ball State going 7-1 just a year ago, winning their bowl game, winning the MAC championship, season opening loss to Miami at Miami. I think Ball State rebounds, wins this one, and moves to 3-1 in conference play.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a really good game to watch, and you'll be at my place, so we'll be able to watch it. It'll be fun.
Sure.
It's a 3:30. That's a 3:30 kickoff on Saturday. Moving on to the next game, Western travels to Toledo. Western is only favored by 2 points, but I'm taking Western in a big one here.
So I have not picked against Toledo at all this year. I am 3-4 on my picks with Toledo. So maybe we switch it up a little bit. I think Western has too much for Toledo to handle. Toledo had a heartbreaking loss at Central this last week, had a heartbreaking loss at Western Michigan a year ago with the surrendering the fake spike touchdown last year. Toledo has a lot to figure out on defense and a lot to figure out on offense, a team who we thought was going to be right in the thick of things come the end of November, now sitting at last in the division. I think Western Michigan marches into the Glass Bowl, and I think they just beat Toledo like a drum. I think it's going to be pretty ugly late in the fourth, and it's Western Michigan by 2 scores.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. Caleb Elby right now is hitting his stride. He's looking really good, and Toledo hasn't had much of an answer on defensively for these past few opponents ever since the Ball State game, really.
Yeah.
So, I think Western wins this by double digits as well. Final game of the weekend, Buffalo travels to Akron. Buffalo favored by 11 points. I think this is one of those double-digit wins for Buffalo as well.
Yeah, I think this one's a very clear Buffalo victory. Buffalo, Kyle Van Treese looking good. That defense is starting to really mesh and gel together. Akron, not as good as OU. I think we all know that. OU almost secured the victory at Buffalo, but I think Buffalo responds well. Coach Mark Linguist gets them refocused, retooled, gets them geared up, and to go get a W down at Infocision Stadium. Down at Akron, I think, again, you're right. This is a 2-score game. Not really much to write home about on this one. And those are our picks for this week.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun week of action. There's a lot of good games, a lot of interest, a lot of intrigue in a lot of these games here this week, especially when you go to Northern Illinois, Michigan, Central Michigan, and Ball State, and Miami of Ohio. Those are 2 games that are massive for the conference.
2 massive games for the conference, 2 games that are going to determine early, well, I guess at the midpoint of who goes where for the conference championship, whatever it may be. These are very critical games for all four of these programs. And they're critical games for the rest of the conference for those who are hanging by a thread, hoping to secure a trip to Detroit. So big games all around for sure.
Helmet stickers next, you right?
Helmet stickers next, yes. Looking back at last week and what teams did in the MAC, I guess we can let's start with the MAC East, and I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm going to go for the East here. Let me pull up my notes here. I'm going to go Jack Sorensen. He finally found his stride last week. He played a great game, over 100 yards receiving. He's one of those guys we were very, very, very high on at the beginning of the year. We didn't get to talk to him at media day. We saw him and didn't get a chance to speak with him. But, he finally had 113 yards with one reception against Akron. And I think that's one of those games that's really going to break him out here. He had a 57-yard touchdown catch. So I think that was a game that he needed going down the home stretch of the conference play. So, yeah, Jack Sorensen is my helmet sticker for the East.
So helmet stickers we want to award to big play guys who do something big, guys who change the tide of a game, if you will. For me, I got to go Armani Rogers, gets my MAC East helmet sticker. That 99-yard touchdown run, not only setting a season record, but an NCAA record. You can't overlook that. And for me, I think he's the winner of my MAC East helmet sticker. Obviously, not much else. I mean, he carried the ball 22 times, got OU on the board a couple of times with his feet, didn't do much passing wise, but when you set a new NCAA record, you can't ignore that, and you can't not give the guy the sticker. That's my helmet sticker for this week for the MAC East.
He's well-deserving, no question about that. For my West, I think it's a pretty clear cut for me. It's Carson Steele for the Ball State Cardinals running back. He had himself a career day. See, he's so irrelevant. His picture is not even in the ESPN app. That's how nobody knows about him. But he had 18 carries, 138 yards, one touchdown. We touched on it earlier, his running style, very violent, very downhill-esque runner. He moves forward, and the Eastern defense had no answer for him, it seemed like, all day long. But yeah, the freshman Carson Steele I think he's out of Greenwood, Indiana.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, down there, yeah. But yeah, he gets my helmet sticker for the West.
Cool. For me, this one's tough. It's a guy I really like for Western Michigan, the wide receiver, Sky Moore. 8 catches, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, you could pretty much give the helmet sticker to anybody on Western Michigan's team. You could probably even give it to the Waterboy if you really wanted to. But to me, his performance sticks out. Jalen Hall obviously could be awarded this as well. 5 catches, 144 yards, and a tutty. But Sky Moore wins this one for me. Came out, balled out. This is a kid who's going to be playing on Sundays.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing, too, the MAC does. Put out some really nice – we're seeing it in the National Football League now. A lot of these receivers are from the MAC, and he'll be joining that class here in the next year or so.
Sure. Last thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that we now have conference realignment talks with the AAC, Conference USA, and the Sun Belt. If I am holding a weapon to you, I won't even say a gun, just if I'm holding a weapon to you and you are the commissioner of the Mid-American Conference for 1 week, which 2 teams are you pursuing to expand the conference?
Well, that's tough. I mean, why not bring Marshall back? I'm okay. I'd be okay with that. Out of Conference USA, oh man, I think Coastal's a little too. They're not the Conference USA, are they?
No, they're Sun Belt.
Sun Belt, that's right. Those two are so similar to me.
Right. Well, I'm with you on Marshall. 100% with you on Marshall. I think you elevate an FCS school.
I think like an Appalachian State would be nice.
App State would be nice, but they're not going to leave the Sun Belt.
No, or a Charlotte maybe.
Charlotte would be good.
Western Kentucky, I think they go to the AAC. I think they'd be really nice there.
Mm-hmm.
But even an East Carolina might be a little too big for the MAC. Maybe like a Middle Tennessee State wouldn't be bad, but I really do like either Charlotte or bringing Marshall back.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I'm with you on Marshall. There's always talks of bringing in North Dakota and South Dakota State. I don't hate it, but I would love to see them promote Illinois State to FCS, because then that renews an old rivalry with Ball State. So you got Illinois State and Ball State, that old rivalry. But then geographically, it would make sense. You now put a second team within bus traveling distance for Northern Illinois and for Ball State. I just think it's geographically, it would make sense to have Illinois State back up in the MAC.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was in Muncie, remember, I think it was 2013, Illinois State came to Muncie week 1 or week 2 of the season. So, obviously geographically, you mentioned it's not that far, but it would be not a bad option. I think you go down to, we're very lucky in the part of the country we live in, is there's so many small football programs who could compete in the MAC and could compete at a high level.
Nope, I agree with you. So those are my teams. I think it's interesting. We're gonna hopefully see the MAC make some moves as we move forward. Obviously, the AAC losing big schools such as Cincinnati and UCF over to the Big 12 with their expansion after losing Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens as expansion talks continue. The AAC bringing in what looks like an unprecedented 6 teams from the Conference USA. Conference USA now, what do you do if you're Conference USA, right? Do you let the conference fall apart, or do you try to bring up some FCS guys? If you're the Sun Belt, you're obviously trying to bring in the Marshalls and those other programs who could fit in well with you and your teams geographically. And if you're the MAC, at this point, you can't be dormant. I think that this is the time where the MAC has to strike. The iron is hot. You have to get out there. You have to be aggressive. You have to pursue some schools. And obviously, the MAC has a national pedigree that people know of, that people are aware of. I saw it on Twitter earlier today. The MAC has to be one of the most stable conferences in all of college football. The last real big change was when Marshall left back in the early 2000s. And that was when they were all sports. UCF was football only. UMass and Temple also football only. So we haven't had a massive change in the Mid-American Conference in almost 20 years. The MAC is arguably the most stable conference in the country. We've got to bring something in and shake that up a little bit, get a little bit more national and regional relevancy.
Definitely. That's one thing we talked about at Media Day with the commissioner, John Steinbrecher. The name of the MAC, how it's not just a regional name anymore. Everybody knows MAC. Everybody knows MACtion. Everybody loves a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night game during the week. And so this is a great opportunity, like you mentioned, for the MAC to expand to 14 teams, pick up 2, go down to the Conference USA, get a Marshall, bring them back, or like I said, a Charlotte, there's so many schools here, like we said, that could make that move seamlessly, really, and fit right into the conference, because geographically wouldn't have to travel very far. Their fans are local, and most of their fans who would be watching on television are in this area too.
Sure.
So it makes it's a massive opportunity. The MAC has had nothing but success over the last couple of years, winning bowl games, winning championships, and everything like that. We went 2-0 in bowl games last year.
2-0 in bowl games last year. Yep.
So the MAC is not a pancake league, if you will. BG went to Minnesota, won a game there this year. That's what's great about the conference, and that's something that these other schools who maybe could join the conference will have that opportunity, not only to go play a Power 5 school and get a nice paycheck, but come out with an upset possibly. In Northern Illinois did the same thing at Georgia Tech this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the history of the MAC and the pedigree it has. Sure, the MAC has struggled historically against some of the other Group of 5 schools, But you mentioned it, we go in, we get upsets against some of these Power Five schools. Western Michigan did it this year at Pitt. Toledo almost pulled off the upset at Notre Dame. I mean, these are programs who are going to be successful and are going to continue to grind. I think the MAC has a couple of things on their hands that they have to do. They have to take care of finding a couple extra programs to bring in who have a little bit, I don't want to say more national relevancy, but more familiarity with the rest of the country, some brands that people can get behind and support as they make a move to the Mid-American Conference. But also, I think the MAC needs to start expanding facilities. You look at some of these other schools, like the Coastal Carolinas, who are brand new to FBS, who have like a 50,000 person stadium. Most MAC stadiums hold about 30,000, 32,000 people. You got to start thinking about, okay, what can we do to bring people in, get people excited to come to our games, and then start worrying about expanding the facility so that we can bring more money, get bigger programs to travel. Because you don't see the Big Ten schools coming to MAC stadiums too often. I know we had Bowling Green traveled to Indiana Indiana traveled to Bowling Green a couple of years ago. And we see that happen every once in a while. But Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State are not going to want to leave the friendly confines of 100,000 people to go and try to win a game in front of 25,000 people. It's just not going to happen.
No, it's not. And you were at Toledo too when Miami came, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a haul for Miami to come all the way up to Toledo to play in the Glass Bowl. Another school that just crossed my mind that wouldn't make bad sense, I don't think, would be Georgia State. They're a program and an organization that's really starting to make a name for themselves in football play as well.
Yeah, they would fit well. As a member, they're already an affiliate member with some of the other sports. I believe soccer is one of them. Them and Georgia Southern are affiliate members with soccer and at least one other sport. So I think having them in the conference would be a positive, and I think it'd be really interesting to see what they could do. But who knows? I'm hoping that the MAC makes some kind of moves to bring in some extra teams, bring in some extra schools, try to generate a little bit more revenue. I think it'll be really exciting to see what happens.
Yeah, we got the state of the conference when we listened to the commissioner at media day, and I mean, there's nothing but positive up and ups for the conference, and that's the way it's going to keep going. Commissioner Steinberger's done a fantastic job in his tenure so far, and I don't see anything different, for the next 5-10 years with him at the helm.
Sure, no, absolutely. So, well, cool, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We are going to be launching a few other things here shortly. Get you guys some stuff for some winter time. We've got some cold gear we're going to be putting out. Going to get some hoodies out and make those available to people. I know Coach Tisdale up at Central Michigan got her hoodie, and I'm excited to see what she thinks as the weather starts to turn. Excited to share that with you guys, and excited to get more stuff to your hands just in general. Hopefully some t-shirts, some, different apparel, whatnot. Looking forward to bringing all that to you guys. Guys, if you aren't following
absolutely.
us
Absolutely. We got a lot of great ideas here. The works, as football season's so busy for us, we, once that starts slowing down, when it gets to winter, we'll be able to spend a little more time doing some of these other things that we need to do. And, but yeah, we've got a lot of fun things, a lot of fun ideas in the works. And we're excited to bring those to you.
Sure. Guys, keep following us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at College Sport Pod. We are nearing 900 followers. We'd love and appreciate that support. If you guys would check us out on Twitter, we're always engaging, interacting with people as we move forward, as we grow, as we talk action, talk some college sports. Go check us out there. You can follow our Sideline Sports Network account at SSN_Maction, where we have surpassed our 500 follower goal a little bit earlier than I thought we were going to, which was a pleasant surprise. You guys can check us out there where we talk strictly Maction and talk all things with all the MAC schools. We argue why the MAC is the greatest conference in the country. You can follow us on Instagram at the CSC Podcast. And then, of course, you can find us on Facebook at the College Sports Connection Podcast. AJ, did you have anything else to throw out to everybody tonight?
That is it for me.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
See you.